What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors refuses to play the gotcha game that daytime television hosts have perfected over decades? What unfolds when a man who has navigated the treacherous waters of fame while maintaining his authenticity walks into a carefully laid trap and simply refuses to step in it? You're about to witness one of the most masterful, understated, and absolutely devastating shutdowns in The View's history. A moment so skillfully executed that it left Joy Behar speechless, exposed her tactics for what they were, and showed millions of viewers exactly how to handle media manipulation. This wasn't a screaming match. This wasn't a heated confrontation with raised voices and pointing fingers. What you're about to read is the story of how Matthew McConaughey, with nothing but calm intelligence and unwavering principle, dismantled Joy Behar's attempt to pigeonhole him into a political position with such graceful precision that she had nowhere to go. By the time his response ended, the trap she'd set lay exposed and useless, and the audience had witnessed a masterclass in maintaining integrity in the face of media manipulation. The studio audience sat in surprised silence as they watched something rare unfold before them. Here was a celebrity who didn't take the bait, who didn't play the expected game, who maintained his composure and his principles without getting drawn into the political theater that The View specializes in creating. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged glances, uncertain how to process what had just happened. Joy Behar, usually so quick with follow-up attacks, found herself facing a response so direct and principled that there was simply no angle of attack left. Little did anyone know that what began as a conversation about school safety and charitable work would become a defining moment in how celebrities can handle hostile political questioning. What Joy Behar thought would be an opportunity to create a viral clip of a Hollywood star taking a political stance would instead become a viral clip of her being outmaneuvered by someone who simply refused to play her game. And what the audience expected, another celebrity falling into line with media orthodoxy, would turn into something far more refreshing, a man thinking for himself. The warning signs were there from the beginning. Anyone who knew Matthew McConaughey's history, anyone familiar with his thoughtful approach to public statements, anyone who had watched him navigate controversial topics before, should have recognized what was about to happen. But Joy Behar, confident in her ability to corner guests with carefully worded questions, walked right into her own trap. She was about to learn that not everyone in Hollywood is willing to sacrifice their principles for applause. The morning started pleasantly enough at The View. Matthew McConaughey walked onto the set with that easy confidence that has made him one of Hollywood's most charismatic presences for decades. The audience erupted in applause, genuine, warm applause for an actor they had watched grow from romantic comedy heartthrob to Oscar-winning dramatic performer. His smile was relaxed, his posture comfortable, the picture of a man completely at ease in the spotlight. He settled into the guest chair with the same laid-back charm that had defined his public persona for years. This was Matthew McConaughey, after all the all right guy, the philosopher actor who had delivered memorable acceptance speeches and built a reputation for being genuinely thoughtful, rather than performatively intellectual. The hosts were clearly delighted to have him. The opening minutes were filled with the kind of pleasant conversation that celebrity interviews are supposed to be: discussion of recent appearances, friendly banter about his family, the warmth of hosts who genuinely seemed to enjoy their guests' company. You not in person, but on TV were at the men's final at the US Open because you were in Djokovic's box, one of the hosts mentioned. And you were the first hug he gave when he came up. You guys go way back. What's the connection there? Matthew's response was warm and genuine. He's first friends with my wife, he explained, and the screen showed an image of his wife Camila, beaming with joy. And then I got to know him through her, and we've had a couple dinners along the way, and I'm a big fan. I mean, what a surgeon and a warrior, and the resilience of what he's done, it's amazing. The conversation flowed easily, touching on his friendship with the tennis legend, the experience of being in the family box during such a momentous victory. It was the kind of celebrity interview content that makes everyone comfortable, light, positive, relatable. You and Camila have 3 kids: Levi, who's 15, Vita, 13, and Livingston, 10, one of the hosts mentioned. What kind of dad are you? Matthew's response revealed the depth that has always set him apart from typical Hollywood celebrities. That's a probably loaded question, he said with a slight laugh. I'm a good dad. We got 20 minutes for this answer? I'm working on it. But then he got serious in a way that showed his genuine values. Look, Being a dad was the only thing that I ever knew I wanted to be. I knew that at 8 years old. I remember shaking hands with my dad's friends, who he would introduce me to, and he was a big sir and ma'am man. And I noticed that everyone I would say yes sir to over the years, when I was 8, the one thing that's common is they're all fathers. He continued, his voice carrying the conviction of someone sharing deeply held beliefs. Maybe that's why I'm calling him sir. And I was like, that's my aspiration. That's when you become a sir as a man. And that was my idea when I was 8. And I still believe it in a lot of ways. This wasn't Hollywood posturing. This was a man sharing his genuine worldview, the importance of fatherhood, of respect, of traditional values about what it means to be a man. The audience listened attentively, perhaps sensing that they were hearing something real rather than the usual celebrity talking points. As you all know, those of you who have children, you find out that DNA means a lot more than you thought it did after you have a kid. Matthew continued. They come out who they are. We shepherd them along as parents' environment does matter a lot, but boy, they are who they are. Everything about this opening segment established Matthew McConaughey as thoughtful, principled, and genuine. He was a devoted husband, a dedicated father, someone who valued traditional masculinity and family. The audience was charmed. The hosts were engaged. But someone at that table was preparing something else entirely. Joy Behar was waiting, loading up a question designed not to explore but to trap, not to understand but to expose, not to converse but to corner. The transition was subtle but unmistakable. One of the hosts began steering the conversation toward more political territory, mentioning Matthew's advocacy work in the wake of the tragic shooting at Robb Elementary School in his hometown of Uvalde, Texas. Let me applaud you for being so outspoken against violence and gun violence in particular, the host said. And you're a Texan, and you spoke so passionately at the White House last year, in the wake of that shooting at Robb Elementary in your hometown. The air in the studio shifted slightly. This was moving from celebrity interview territory into political discussion, the kind of territory where careers can be made or destroyed based on a single quote taken out of context. Matthew handled it with grace, discussing his wife's emotional presentation of the green Converse shoes worn by one of the young victims, the launch of the Green Lights Grant Initiative to help make schools safer. His focus was practical, bipartisan, solution-oriented. What we found out after what happened at Robb Elementary and many other schools, first bill passed in 30 years to help make schools safer, bipartisan, Safer Communities Act. Billions of dollars to make schools safer, he explained. What I find out months after the bill's been passed is that very few applications are going in from the school districts. And for those that are applying, very few are getting granted and awarded. So the money is still there. We're like, wait, where's the gap? His explanation was the kind of practical problem solving that actually helps people. He described how school administrators in small districts are often stretched thin, driving the school bus, teaching PE, and don't have the time or expertise to navigate 50-page federal grant applications. The government wants these grants to be filed. They want to spend the money. It's use it or lose it money. And if we don't spend that money that the government has by 2026, it could be reallocated. This was substantive, thoughtful, helpful information. Matthew McConaughey wasn't posturing for political points. He was describing real work he was doing to protect children, regardless of which side of the political aisle you stood on. It was the kind of nonpartisan advocacy that should be celebrated. But Joy Behar wasn't interested in celebrating nonpartisan solutions. She was loading up her trap, preparing to spring the question that was designed to force Matthew into a corner from which she assumed there was no escape. In 2021, you considered a run for governor of the state of Texas, Joy Behar began, her voice carrying that particular tone of someone who thinks they're about to land a devastating blow. Do you think political office is in your future? Can you see that? Matthew's response was measured and honest. If it's where I would deem myself to be most useful, yes. That should have been enough. He had given a thoughtful, conditional answer about potentially serving in public office if he felt called to do so. It was humble, considered, appropriate. But Joy wasn't satisfied. She wasn't looking for a thoughtful answer. She was looking for a soundbite. She was looking for a gotcha moment. She was looking to trap Matthew McConaughey into a position that could either alienate his Texas fan base or his Hollywood colleagues either way, creating the controversy that makes for viral clips. Do you think you could get elected in Texas being anti-gun? Joy asked, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who believes they've just delivered a knockout punch. The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon pointed directly at Matthew's career. It was a classic media trap, the kind of binary choice designed to force a public figure into a position they never intended to take. Answer yes, and you've just declared yourself anti-gun on national television. Answer no, and you're admitting you'd have to abandon your principles to win. Either way, Joy Behar gets her headline. Every celebrity before Matthew had either fallen into this trap or clumsily avoided it in a way that made them look evasive or dishonest. The View had perfected this technique over years, using it to corner guests and create the kind of controversy that drives ratings. But Matthew McConaughey was about to do something that Joy Behar clearly didn't expect. He was going to refuse to play the game entirely, and do it in a way that exposed exactly what she was trying to do. Matthew's response was devastating in its simplicity. "Do I think I could get elected in Texas being anti-gun?" he repeated back, his voice calm but carrying an edge of recognition. The recognition of someone who sees exactly what's being attempted. One thing about if me in politics is to give you a direct statement right there is playing a game that I'm not interested in playing. Boom. In one sentence, Matthew McConaughey had completely neutralized the trap. He hadn't denied being anti-gun. He hadn't claimed to be pro-gun. He hadn't answered the question at all. Instead, he had exposed the question itself as a manipulation, a game designed not to understand his position, but to force him into a politically damaging corner. "Give you a direct statement right there is playing a game that I'm not interested in playing," he repeated, making absolutely certain that everyone understood what had just happened. Joy Behar sat there, her trap disarmed, her gotcha moment evaporated. She had no follow-up because there was nothing to follow up on. Matthew hadn't given her any material to work with. He hadn't taken the bait. He had simply, elegantly, definitively refused to participate in her manipulation. The audience sat in stunned appreciation. This wasn't what they were used to seeing. Celebrities usually either fell into these traps or awkwardly dodged them in ways that made them look evasive. Matthew had done something different. He had called out the trap while it was being set, exposed the game for what it was, and refused to participate, all without raising his voice or getting confrontational. It was a masterclass in media manipulation defense. By explicitly identifying what Joy was trying to do, forcing him into a binary position on a complex issue, he had made it impossible for her to continue the attack without looking like exactly the kind of manipulator she was. What made Matthew's response even more impressive was that he had actually spoken publicly about guns before, and his position was nuanced in a way that didn't fit neatly into either side's talking points. But that nuance was exactly what Joy Behar was trying to eliminate with her trap. In his previous statements about the Uvalde shooting, Matthew had laid out a position that was thoughtful, measured, and designed to find common ground. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks. We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them. These were specific policy proposals, not sweeping ideological declarations. They were the kinds of reforms that many Americans across the political spectrum could potentially support. The kinds of practical solutions that actually stand a chance of being implemented. These are reasonable, practical, tactical regulations to our nation, states, communities, schools, and homes, Matthew had said. Responsible gun owners are fed up with the Second Amendment being abused and hijacked. Notice what he did there. He explicitly aligned himself with responsible gun owners and framed his proposals as protecting the Second Amendment from abuse, not attacking it. This wasn't an anti-gun position. It was a pro-responsibility position that respects the Second Amendment, while advocating for specific safety measures. These regulations are not a step back, he continued. They're a step forward for a civil society and the Second Amendment. This was exactly the kind of nuanced, thoughtful position that Joy Behar's binary question was designed to erase. By asking if he thought he could get elected being anti-gun, she was trying to collapse all that nuance into a simple label that could be used as a weapon against him. Matthew recognized this and refused to participate. He understood that once you accept a false label, you've lost the ability to defend your actual position. By rejecting the premise of her question entirely, he preserved his ability to maintain his nuanced, thoughtful stance without it being reduced to a talking point. What Joy Behar tried to do and what Matthew so skillfully prevented was a perfect example of the media manipulation that has made political discourse so toxic in America. Her question was designed to pigeonhole him into a position, one that he might not even hold in the way she was characterizing it. This is what journalists and political operatives do all the time. They want you on record saying something that can be taken out of context, clipped for social media, used to define you in ways you never intended. The reality is that complex issues like gun rights and public safety exist in gray areas. They're not black and white, yes or no, all or nothing. But media figures like Joy Behar thrive on false binaries because nuance doesn't create viral moments. Matthew McConaughey saw through this completely. By explicitly calling it a game I'm not interested in playing, he exposed the tactics for what they were and refused to be a pawn in someone else's political theater. This is something that more public figures desperately need to learn. The media's power to manipulate comes from their subjects' willingness to participate in the manipulation. When you refuse to accept their false premises, refuse to be cornered by their loaded questions, refuse to play their game, they have no power over you. Politicians and journalists have perfected the art of asking questions that don't have good answers, questions designed to make any response look bad. They're skilled at articulating things in ways that walk around actual answers, that create impressions without making commitments, that manipulate without appearing to manipulate. Matthew McConaughey beat them at their own game by simply refusing to play. And he did it with such grace and confidence that Joy Behar couldn't even attempt a follow-up without looking like exactly the manipulator she was. Beyond the masterful media handling, Matthew's approach highlighted something important about the actual policy debate around school safety and gun violence. The real issue isn't as simple as pro-gun or anti-gun. The real issue is that children are being killed in schools, and everyone agrees that's a tragedy that needs to be prevented. The disagreement is about how to prevent it, not about whether it should be prevented. Matthew's work with the Green Lights Grant Initiative was a perfect example of practical, nonpartisan problem-solving. He identified a gap in the system. Federal money allocated for school safety wasn't reaching the schools that needed it because of bureaucratic barriers, and created an organization to bridge that gap. This is what actual leadership looks like. Not posturing for political points, not creating viral moments, not forcing people into false binaries, but identifying real problems and working to solve them in ways that bring people together. The government wants these grants to be filed, Matthew had explained. They want to spend the money. It's use it or lose it money. This wasn't a partisan statement. This was a man who had seen his hometown devastated by tragedy, who had held the green Converse shoes of a murdered child, who had decided to do something practical to help, rather than just score political points. The contrast between Matthew's approach and Joy Behar's approach couldn't have been starker. He was trying to save children's lives through practical action. She was trying to create a viral moment by trapping him with a loaded question. He was focused on solutions. She was focused on controversy. He was operating in good faith. She was operating in pure political theater. Beyond the specific exchange about guns, Matthew's response revealed something important about maintaining integrity in a culture that constantly tries to force people into ideological boxes. The pressure to conform, to take sides, to declare yourself as belonging to one tribe or another, this pressure is relentless in modern America. You're either pro this or anti that. You're either with us or against us. You're either on the right side of history or you're a bigot. There's no room for nuance, for thought, for positions that don't fit neatly into predetermined categories. Matthew McConaughey showed that it's possible to resist this pressure. You don't have to accept the false choices that media figures try to force on you. You don't have to play the game they've set up. You can simply, calmly, confidently refuse, and in doing so, expose their manipulation for what it is. Playing a game that I'm not interested in playing. Those words should become a mantra for anyone who has to navigate political discussions in modern America. When someone tries to trap you with a false binary, when they try to force you into a box you don't belong in, when they try to make you take a position that doesn't represent your actual beliefs, you don't have to participate. You can simply refuse to play the game. This doesn't mean avoiding difficult conversations or hiding your actual positions. Matthew has been very public about his views on gun safety, school security, and the tragedy of mass shootings. But he shares those views on his own terms, in contexts where nuance is possible, not in gotcha moments designed to reduce complex positions to simple labels. The broader implications of this exchange go beyond media manipulation to touch on something fundamental about how we discuss important issues in America. The school shooting problem is real. Children are dying. This is not something anyone disputes. But solving this problem requires thoughtful, nuanced discussion that brings people together rather than driving them apart. It requires recognizing that pro-gun people and anti-gun people might actually agree on more than they disagree on if they could just have honest conversations. Matthew McConaughey's advocacy has been focused on this kind of bridge building. His proposals, background checks, age restrictions for certain weapons, red flag laws are the kinds of measures that many gun owners actually support. His framing protecting responsible gun ownership while preventing abuse is designed to find common ground rather than create division. Joy Behar's question was designed to destroy that common ground. By trying to force Matthew into an anti-gun box, she was trying to make him unacceptable to the very people he was trying to reach. She was prioritizing political combat over actual solutions, controversy over progress, her agenda over children's lives. Matthew recognized this and refused to participate. And in doing so, he preserved his ability to continue advocating for practical solutions that might actually make a difference. This is the model that more public figures need to follow. Don't let media manipulators define you. Don't accept false binaries. Don't play games that serve their agenda at the expense of actual progress. Stand your ground, maintain your integrity, and keep focused on what actually matters. Joy Behar sat silently after Matthew's response, her trap completely neutralized. She had no follow-up because there was nothing to follow up on. He hadn't given her any material to work with, any quote to clip, any position to attack. He had simply, elegantly, refused to participate in her manipulation. The rest of the interview proceeded without incident, but the moment had been captured. Matthew McConaughey had demonstrated something rare and valuable: how to maintain integrity in the face of media pressure, how to refuse manipulation without appearing evasive, how to stand your ground while remaining graceful and composed. For viewers watching at home, especially those tired of the endless political theater that passes for discussion in modern media, it was a refreshing example of how things could be different. Here was a celebrity who thought for himself, who didn't bow to pressure from either side, who maintained nuanced positions in a culture that demands simplicity, who refused to be pigeonholed even when powerful media figures tried to force him into a box. The contrast between Matthew's thoughtful, practical approach to school safety and Joy Behar's gotcha-oriented approach to political discussion couldn't have been clearer. One was trying to solve problems. The other was trying to create controversy. One was focused on children's lives. The other was focused on viral moments. One was operating in good faith. The other was operating in pure political theater. And when they collided, the good faith approach won. Not through confrontation or raised voices, but through simple, principled refusal to participate in manipulation. What Matthew McConaughey demonstrated in that brief exchange has implications far beyond one interview on one daytime talk show. He showed that celebrities don't have to be pawns in political theater. He showed that maintaining nuanced positions is possible even in a media environment designed to eliminate nuance. He showed that refusing to play the game is itself a powerful move that exposes the game for what it is, playing a game that I'm not interested in playing. These words should echo in the minds of every public figure, every politician, every person who has ever been cornered by a loaded question designed to trap rather than understand. You don't have to participate. You can refuse. And when you refuse with grace and confidence, you expose the manipulator while maintaining your integrity. The question that Joy Behar asked whether Matthew could get elected being anti-gun was never really about understanding his position. It was about creating a moment, about forcing a quote, about reducing a complex issue to a simple label that could be used as a weapon. By refusing to answer on those terms, Matthew protected not just his political viability, but the integrity of the actual policy discussion. Because the truth is, the gun debate in America doesn't need more gotcha moments. It needs more people like Matthew McConaughey, people who can acknowledge the tragedy of mass shootings while respecting the Second Amendment, people who can propose practical solutions while recognizing legitimate concerns on all sides, people who can bring people together instead of driving them apart. Joy Behar's approach drives people apart. Matthew's approach brings them together. And in that brief exchange, viewers got to see both approaches demonstrated clearly, side by side. One was exposed as manipulation. The other was revealed as integrity. And everyone watching could decide for themselves which approach they wanted to see more of in American public life. The answer, for most viewers, was obvious. They wanted more Matthew McConaughey's thoughtful, principled, genuine people who refused to be manipulated and maintain their integrity even under pressure. And they wanted fewer Joy Behar's media figures who prioritize controversy over solutions, gotcha moments over genuine understanding, political theater over actual progress. That's the legacy of this moment. Not just one clever response to one loaded question, but a demonstration of how to maintain integrity in a culture that constantly tries to destroy it. A reminder that you don't have to play the games that powerful people try to make you play. A proof that refusing to participate in manipulation is itself a form of victory. Matthew McConaughey walked off that set with his integrity intact, his nuanced position preserved, and Joy Behar's trap lying exposed and useless behind him. And everyone watching knew exactly what they had witnessed. A masterclass in maintaining principles in the face of pressure, delivered with the easy confidence of a man who knows exactly who he is and refuses to let anyone else define him. All right indeed.